My master's research this past summer, I conducted it in Southern Ontario, and I was seeking to understand the predominant stressors that Jamaican seasonal agricultural workers experience when they're working and living in Canada, and to understand how these workers cope with this stress, and also to gather suggestions for how social support services might be developed in a way that meets the needs of the workers. And I also should say I'm an anthropology student, and part of my discipline is to put the perspective of the people I work with front and center. So you will see that some of my slides will be predominantly quotes directly from workers that sort of illustrate and motivate and substantiate my findings. Okay. So under the SOP, Mexican workers come to Canada, as do workers from Caribbean countries that were formerly under the British Commonwealth. And I did initially set out to explore Caribbean workers' mental health. However, early in the season, I narrowed my scope down to Jamaican workers. All SOP workers generally arrive in Canada healthy, but the social determinants of health associated with farm work in Canada often contribute to a variety of poor health outcomes, including poor mental health. So this presentation will detail some of the findings from my research, focusing on the stressors that I uncovered that are shared, common stressors, as well as the two variables that provide workers with a buffer against those stressors. From the inception of the SOP in 1966, Jamaicans were the first to travel to Canada under this program to work in Canadian agriculture, primarily the labor-intensive horticulture sector in Southern Ontario. So for the past 50 years now, the flow of temporary laborers from Jamaica to Canada has been steadily increasing, with more than 8,000 Jamaican workers coming to work in Canada in 2015. These workers are generally motivated by financial insecurity in Jamaica, as well as a desire to provide their families with a better life. But coming to Canada means they must leave these families for up to 8 months of the year, during which time they send money home to support them. So this article here in a Jamaican newspaper is essentially espousing the economic virtues of the SOP to the Jamaican economy. And it reported that the preliminary figures from the 2015 period show a 20% increase in remittances from the program over the 2014 earnings of 16 million Canadian dollars. So as I mentioned, my research objectives were to uncover the common stressors experienced by Jamaican SOP workers, as well as the coping strategies that they employ. And I also, as an anthropology student, wanted to understand the culturally specific explanatory models. That's sort of the way they understand mental health, the way that Jamaican workers conceive of what it means to be mentally healthy. So as I also mentioned early in my season, I narrowed my focus to Jamaican workers, and I was surprised that many of the workers that I spoke with over the season maintained a positive psychological state of mind, a positive affect, and had a very hopeful disposition, despite describing and experiencing some egregious stressors, either acutely or chronically. So I also sought to understand the mechanisms that underlay this variation in mental health outcomes that I was observing in all regions. I also wanted to see how workers are differently supported in the different regions of the province, so that I might understand how regions could share ideas or network resources to address workers' mental health across the province, not just regionally. So during the 2015 growing season, I conducted research in 3 regions of Southern Ontario that host Caribbean SOP workers. Norfolk County and Niagara region, who both of those regions host the greatest concentrations of workers, but also Durham region, sort of off to the side there. That's my home community that hosts Caribbean SOP workers, but has very few resources available to them. So over the season, I interviewed, surveyed, and engaged in direct participation observation with workers in all 3 regions. So this presentation considers the data that came from there. These survey questions and interview questions were designed to elicit the stressors, coping strategies, suggestions for social support, as well as culturally specific understandings about mental health. So over the season, I conducted multiple in-depth interviews with 3 Jamaican workers, and I administered 21 surveys. I had intended to administer many more surveys, but it turned out that in each of my visits to Simcoe or in around Durham region, my time was spent transporting injured workers to and from medical services, assisting repatriated workers get to various places. So my survey goal fell away as well. Throughout the season, I did maintain electronic communication via text, phone, and WhatsApp, with now close to 40 workers, who many of whom are my friends, and who maintain contact to send blessings up from Jamaica on a regular basis. So, I also engaged in participant observation over the summer at a variety of events in all 3 regions, including health fairs, recreation events, and health promotion events and workshops. And I also drove workers, as I mentioned, to medical clinics and social services, and this required that I visit farms, bunkhouses, crop fields in all 3 regions, and in this way I witnessed a variety of working and living conditions across Southern Ontario. One limitation I might note is that I decided early on not to recruit any workers around local bars, restaurants, or retailers that sell alcohol. That was partly informed by my being a young woman and on my own as a researcher. So I ended up using this in Simcoe specifically, where I did the bulk of my research. It was an outreach pamphlet that I thought sort of allowed workers to have a clear understanding of who I was and what I was offering to them, with a big strong emphasis on church and connecting with churches, which actually earned me the nickname of Sister Mayell among a good group of workers in Simcoe. So most of the workers that I interviewed and surveyed reported little to no alcohol consumption, and nearly all expressed religious worldviews. Many of the workers, though, reported alcohol abuse amongst their housemates as a major cause of stress. So during my fieldwork, I identified a constellation of common stressors that Jamaican stop workers encounter, and these are comprised of occupational stressors associated with farm work, combined with acculturative stress associated with their migration to a new society and a new culture, and the psychosocial stressors that are associated with the racism and social discrimination that they experience in Ontario communities. And for analytic ease, I organized these stressors into 5 broad categories. The first of which is family. So most workers told me that the main reason that they work in Canada is to earn money that will give their families a better life back home. So it is unsurprising that the stressors associated with homesickness, missing family, and transnational parenting were predominant in my findings, as Trevor explained to me. If you are in Canada and you are working and you don't have any support, it makes no sense to come. You have to have support and get support from your family. You have to be able to maintain your family from here and make your family back home feel happy. Because if you have a family back home giving you trouble while you're in Canada dealing with the stress from the boss, it's too much pressure. Work environments. So typically working 6 days or more each week, stop workers put in long hours of hard physical labor and they have minimal job control. And this in turn gives rise to stressors associated with rigid work demands, fear of repatriation, powerlessness, abusive employers, lack of personal workplace protections, and conflicts with coworkers and supervisors. In one of my conversations with Trevor, I asked him to describe to me his average workday, and he told me, "You get up at 5 a.m. and you work right through the day. You only get 15-minute break in the morning, half hour for lunchtime, and 15-minute break in the evening. Within that time, you have to always be bending your back and working right through the day. So it's very hard for you to be comfortable in the environment. Because we in Jamaica think that everything is gold in Canada, but yet still it's like we're still in slavery. Because you come here and the boss is going to tell you that you can't get up for 2 seconds just to stand up and look around." Living conditions. So the living conditions in which SOP workers live in Ontario give rise to a set of stressors that are associated not only with social isolation, but also substandard housing, inadequate amenities, lack of privacy, and conflict with housemates. Patrick told me, "Don't you think Jamaican people have homes? Do you think we live in shacks? We have quality houses back home. So when I look at the bunkhouse and how offshore workers live here, I wonder, how is it Canada is a first world country when things are so backward?" So racism and lack of social connectedness in Ontario. The rural communities that host Caribbean SOP workers are generally not welcoming or inclusive of them. And many in all regions lamented to me the rude treatment that they receive, not only from local retailers, but also just from people on the street. particularly though the retailers who they feel they are spending their hard-earned money at. And so one of the survey respondents told me, "We know you have racists here in Canada and that people don't like black people. When we go into downtown, it's obvious. The cashiers at the grocery store won't even look up at you, but if it is a white person, they say hello and they smile. I've seen it many times." So injury and illness. Many SOP workers are injured on the job each year. Jamaican workers who return home injured face numerous stressors, and from what I experienced during my field work, injured workers are the most prone to poor mental health outcomes. Clayton, a friend and a worker who was injured on the farm, explained to me, "I left Jamaica as a worker, but I came home as a patient. Injured workers are those guys who suffer a lot. Now I can't feed my children, and nobody cares. What kind of a system is this? This is a slavery system that breaks bodies." Moreover, getting sick in Canada can initiate a prompt repatriation, and this fear prevents many sick workers from accessing health care while they are in Ontario. So, in light of those stressors, as I mentioned, the good majority of Jamaican workers I encountered this season in all three regions maintained a positive disposition, a hopeful outlook, and in fact, oftentimes inspired me to maintain a similarly positive outlook. So the workers I surveyed most commonly reported, so self-reported, listening to music, calling home, and watching television as their strategies for handling the stress of living and working in Canada. But I found that there were two interconnected variables that provided workers with a buffer against stress, and that is a positive affect and access to social support. In this way, the workers who displayed the greatest mental health were those who remained positive in the face of stress, and this ability was often associated with personal spirituality as well as community connections in Ontario. The availability for social support for migrant farm workers in Canada varies by province and region. But the two main ongoing sources of migrant worker support that I experienced during my fieldwork were churches and regional support networks. In the case of Jamaican workers, both positive affect and community support were intrinsically linked to spirituality and religion in two ways. One, workers with a consistent positive affect often focused on uncovering the personal and deeper spiritual meaning of a challenging or stressful situation. And second, the workers who have community connections and supports in Ontario often do so through their affiliations with the churches. Many churches in rural Ontario are involved in local support networks and offer worship services for migrant farm workers. And it has been my experience that the workers who attended these services were generally able to manage stressful events and source support. Many of the workers I spoke with in Norfolk were involved with a local church that has a long-standing relationship with Jamaican workers. Trevor explained to me how this benefits them. When the pastor comes to have a prayer meeting with us at the bunkhouse and to talk to us, that helps us a lot. Because sometimes a little prayer is good for us. Even though a lot of us are not Christians, we are God-believing people, so you know it helps us. In the evening, we can call home and say, "We want you to pray for me when you go to church," and the pastor from that church can give a prayer or something, because we're under a lot of stress in Canada. It will help the situation, because when you come here to work, it's hard if you don't have any support from anybody. Regions that host migrant workers often have support networks, and these networks are comprised of volunteers, students, community and provincial organizations, and local churches. In Ontario, Norfolk and Niagara have the most workers, and they have the most ongoing support services available to them. For example, both regions operate Agricultural Workers Alliance support centers and migrant worker health clinics. And although there are many groups that support migrant farm workers in Ontario, such as Justicia for Migrant Workers and the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, because my research focused on mental health, social support, and health, there were 3 member organizations involved in networks in Southern Ontario that stood out during my research. So the first is the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers, who assist in the planning and delivery of migrant worker health fairs across the province, as well as operating primary health care clinics at these fairs. And they also deliver health and safety promotion workshops on farms. So the second was the Agricultural Workers Alliance, who provide practical support services to workers at centers throughout Southern Ontario. And importantly, these centers also offer a safe and inclusive space in the community where workers can sit and connect to Wi-Fi. This allows them to contact family back home for free over a WhatsApp. And the third is community health centers, who not only operate migrant worker health clinics in both Norfolk and Niagara, but actually have representatives sitting on network boards in all three of the regions that I did research in this past summer. So in Simcoe, Jamaican workers call the AWA Center the baby office because of the help that they have there in filling out their parental forms to get their EI if they have a baby being born during their time in Canada. I spent many valued hours at the AWA speaking with workers such as Randall, who told me, it's like Canada has certain nice people, like you, and like the nice ladies at this baby office. This is a good place for offshore workers. And the doctor clinic too. We can see that you people care. And the Jamaicans, we respect people who respect us. If you show us love, we'll show you love until the end. It's important to have this place, the AWA, to sit and relax. So discussion and conclusions. During my fieldwork, I found, like I said, that a positive psychological state and a hopeful disposition, combined with social support in Ontario, offer Jamaican workers a buffer against the negative health outcomes that are associated with chronic or severe acute stress. This social support is made possible by networks that knit together a variety of community organizations who combine efforts to provide workers with ongoing supports in the community. I have to note that churches are a very important actor in these networks. Future support efforts should continue to build community capacity with the overall goal of aiming to integrate regional efforts across the province. And I would argue that more safe and inclusive places such as that provided by the AWA and the migrant worker health clinics should be established on a permanent ongoing basis in Ontario so that workers will have a stable and ongoing quality support that they can access. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
More of a comment. Throughout your whole presentation, I was nodding my head like, yeah, that's exactly it. So I thought the statements that you got from them directly was very effective because it's not sugarcoated at all, and nor should it be. And then also with, with the social support, it's like needed because occasionally we'll have events for them, and it could just be in our room. We just provide food and music and whatnot, and when they come in, like you could just see, like as they're walking through the door, they just feel their weight lifted off of their shoulders and whatnot because they just want to do something outside of going to work and coming home, and especially because where they work and their bunkhouse is like no further than from where I am to you.
Yeah, that's right.
And then in Leamington, for example, because that's I'm from Windsor, so that's where we frequent the Jamaican migrant workers, where they are to like civilization. Like you could barely walk it. Never mind riding your bike is however long, and after doing a 14-hour shift, by the time you ride your bike to civilization, everything is closed and the city is dead, so it just looks, they're like miserable and whatnot. So like doing things like that, we've gone to their bunks and played soccer with them outside. They whooped my butt, but still, just the fact that we were there and that somebody that's not a migrant worker cares about them and like comes just to say hello. We play dominoes with them and everything, and that just like makes their day, So that social support part is very effective and needed.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Yeah.
Just an observation when you were mentioning some of the deplorable conditions that they live in. What we did in our area, again, for us, it's the more you're going to do for the employers, the more receptive they are. We began to collect couches, and we would go in and replace their furniture, and we would offer to do the labor. We would take firefighters or somebody that did carpentry on the side where there was mold in the walls, and we would volunteer to go in, and the church would pay for the materials. So we just kind of pushed our way in that way, and we didn't have anybody turn us down because the responsibility wasn't on them. And then if there were any code violations, then through the networking that we all need to have, you just whisper in the right ear sideways and put it in somebody else's hand. But yeah, so taking the furniture made a huge difference for a couple of the farms for us.
Wow, I took so many ideas from your presentation, actually.
Oh,
Like, you know, we're ready down frantically because those are fantastic. The issue is overcoming the growers and getting them to engage and to see it as an issue that's important and worth prioritizing.
But even with yours and just everything I'm hearing so far, in our immediate area, the Jamaican workers would prefer not to. So our challenge, and my last point was changed for 2016, we have to hit the Jamaican farms and open up those conversations and just have specialized events for them. And if only 5 guys come, that's what they do. But just because we don't want them thinking we just celebrate the Mexican workers and they don't matter in the community. So we have some work to do too.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm not sure if they mentioned it to you that I find to be very useful for them is the roving salespeople from their community. And another time I did this. And what happens is that there's a great interaction with them comparing stories and relating what's happening back home and having those conversations that help them manage their stress. I have seen cases where at 1 o'clock you knock on the door and everybody wakes up to come down and talk. And it's part of their mental health that those people are helping to help them cope with as it is. So that's one piece that didn't come out in your presentation, and I think that maybe somewhere it needs to be addressed, is that because some farmers don't like when you come on the site, especially if you're coming late, and that's the time, especially tobacco farmers. If you come late, he has been running and he wants them up at 3 o'clock to go change stuff, they don't want you on there. But these guys want you because it's an interaction that they get, that you're telling them about somebody, and somebody you know, is maybe from your area, saying, well, I spoke to so-and-so and they say this happened. And it's just a connection back then and now too.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely.
So just a little bit on that, I wanted to ask, when you were going into the farms, or when you're going to play soccer and knock on the doors, what are the farmers' thoughts on that? How easy is it to get in there, and how do you get that, permission to do so?
Right. So I would say it varies by, my experience was it varied by region. I was in 3 regions, and so I did not visit any farms in Niagara. The only farms that I visited were both in Durham and many in Norfolk. So Norfolk was kind of iffy. There were some farms that were not safe. And likely, those are the farms where the conditions are known to be substandard, and the farm owners are concerned that anyone might lay eyes on that and initiate any kind of an inspection. So those are the farmers that have something to hide, don't want many people coming and going from their land. However, many farms received me probably as a girlfriend, and the workers will tell me that. I often was going there to bring workers to and from the medical clinic or to and from the specialist clinic. So I was coming a lot. And often the only other women driving alone in a car and then leaving with a group of workers are girlfriends. And I have told all of my worker friends to please not shatter that illusion in the eyes of your employer, because it's just better for all of us if they believe me to be just a friend or someone in the community. For the reasons that actually you mentioned, like often the fear is that it's like that I'm there to unionize the workers, or that I'm there to inspire some kind of big mobilization from the bottom, which I am, but I don't. So that's one thing. I really often was viewed as a girlfriend, but certain farms where I had an ongoing relationship with a worker for a health reason, many cases in my home community, I was allowed to come on and off, and the time was allotted. I actually arranged for a wound care nurse to visit a farm worker on the farm, and that particular grower was really, really, really accommodating, did not want to deal directly with me though, communicated through the worker.
And similar to you, I found that the farms that I used to visit, I continued after South Southington, just going on the there is usually one guy who's a connector. That's the guy that gets you in and introduces you to the boss. Boss, this is Oliver. He's a good man, there's this, and you have a conversation, and then you're okay.
Yes.
If you bring too many people with you, the boss might want to know who you're bringing on and that type of thing. But if you're consistently 2 of you or 1 of you going, you'll be out there looking and say, oh, it's you, it's fine.
Yes.
But you have to really use the connector to get you in there.
It's true, the foreman, they oftentimes in my home.
Sometimes it's not the foreman.
Oh, I know, sometimes it's the
They
senior
might-
guys. They
they're-
often
they're-
sit me down and vet me too.
Yeah.
Actually, the
Yes.
workers will vet me because they don't want me to inadvertently make any trouble with their
It's
employer.
hard for them.
But there are cases, and I'm sure it's kind of across the board, where there are people that go in for the wrong reasons. So whether it's income tax and charging them this much, or deals to send their money home, and some of these guys just get, I've seen income tax forms where they should have got $3,000, they should have had money when their wife had the child that they never see. And then when you contact the people that did their income tax, nobody knows what you're talking about. So there are cases that you understand why the employers and even the workers are leery about who's coming to our farm.
And I'm going to say that not all the farmers are bad,
I agree.
Absolutely.
I met some wonderful farmers.
right?
too.
Because some of them really love these guys,
Yeah.
and they try to protect them from that predatory kind of engagement.
Yeah.
And so they want to know, and so you go into a room and there are six guys in the room, and one is sitting on the corner and he's not engaging with you. He's the guy who's checking you out. And he's going to determine whether or not you're good at come back or not. And if he says, well, he's okay, next time he starts talking to you, you're in. But he's relating stuff to the boss to say, well, then I don't think this guy should be here. And then you're closed out.
I know, I'm very careful with that dynamic that I
dynamic
don't.
you have to watch that.
Yes, definitely.
I would just be adding to that, everything you said is right, but sometimes you have to be on their level and follow by their rules. There was a project that one of my colleagues was working on, and he just wanted to take pictures, and it's called the After Work. It was called a project called the After Work. It had nothing to do with going into media or nothing, just a booklet and given right back to them. It's maybe about this big, maybe 75 pictures, about 70 are Mexican workers, 5 is Jamaican workers. And that was because at the end of it, he was just like, I just can't get through to these Jamaicans. Like, I would love to, I want to see what they're doing, playing soccer, which is in our eyes normal. But you have a man that is around the age of 45 to 50, a professional camera, and he's also Caucasian. And he looks no different than some of their bosses that treat them like crap and whatnot. So, that between myself and Raquel Bremer that was speaking from Windsor AIDS Committee, we knew some of the seniors and whatnot, because we ask them what they like to do, and we provide that for them. They just want to sit around, listen to their cultural music. We bring boom boxes and let them listen to that kind of stuff, and let them know that this guy's okay. Maybe not even 3-4 days later, I was like, he's with me, he's okay. And now there's millions of pictures of these guys posing, playing soccer, playing this, because they trusted us, and we told them that he's okay. But when you even myself as a Canadian citizen that has no criminal record or whatnot, if someone had just came up to me to just ask me to take a picture with a professional camera, I'm going to ask 21 questions.
Yeah, that's right.
So
For sure. Well, and we, like in Simcoe, Camille and I were at the hub on Friday nights oftentimes, and in the beginning of the season when new guys come, it's hard to get something that's there, known, and spread and the word out. And we've had some similar things. I remember one of the workers said to me, I defend you and Camille to all those guys who say different things about you. We tell them, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, you ladies are doing something good for us guys, but they're suspicious. And so you have to also break down the notion, like, you don't want to come across like you're being charitable when you're trying to provide supports that are health related and that actually seek to integrate these people into the society. It's not a charity effort, it's like it's a human effort. So that was one of the things that I noticed early in the season. I was misconstrued one way and then another way, and it took a good 6 weeks.
right. And you need to visit frequently. You can't just come once, get a little bit of
every week.
information, 6 months later come back. It's like you have to be there every couple of days, couple of weeks.
And they feel the absence of ongoing
Oh, for sure.
volunteers like they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for all your awesome questions.
Thank you.